somebody who's been very successful in business and life, Mr. Alex Hormozi.
Alex Hormozi.
Alex Hormozi.
We've never had a guest so requested before.
Alex has been absolutely taking the internet by storm over the last year or two.
He has a proven track record of scaling multiple companies to achieve over 100 million in revenue.
Also absolutely jacked and just produces loads and loads of content, which is all around helping you start and build a business.
And for those of you who don't know, my name is Alex Hormozi. We own acquisition.com. Our portfolio does about $85 million a year. I give you all this stuff because I just want you to not be broke. I have nothing to sell you.
They're like, I deserve success. Like, they don't. No one deserves anything. But you can do the stuff that gets success independent of you deserving this. You can be a terrible person and become successful.
6 figures is sell something to someone. That's it.
My name's Alex Hormozi. Alex Hormozi. I own acquisition.com. The definition of power, as I understand it, is the gap between thoughts becoming reality.
People have 2 sets of resources, right, that they allocate. So they've got time and they've got money.
Yeah.
And so if you look at someone's bank statement and you look at their calendar, you know what their life is. And you can also predict where their life is going to be in X amount of years, right? And so if someone wants to change what their life is going to look like, you have to reallocate where you're investing the resources that you have. And so from a time perspective, people who are poor, in my opinion, spend a lot of time not doing stuff. And that sounds terrible to say, but like at the base level, they're distracted, they're
not doing the right
procrastinating.
stuff.
Right. Well, I would even say not doing anything.
Just distracting them.
Right.
Playing
Just
video games.
Netflix, etc. You know,
Yeah,
all
yeah.
that stuff, right? So there's like the basis, like they don't do anything. They're purely distracting themselves from their current state, which is hard because it's hard to confront reality. If you're like not happy, it's easier to just distract yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now the level above that is you've got people who are operating, they are working every day, but they're operating in low leverage opportunities, right? So they're doing things that do not give them a lot of return on their time, right? And so it's like I could work, it doesn't matter how many hours I work at McDonald's, like it's very, very difficult to become wealthy there, right? It's just near impossible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus like you could buy a building for $10 million and then sell it to somebody else for $11 million, just get the contract and make $1 million on the exchange. Super high leverage, right? From a time perspective, which is crazy for somebody who doesn't have money to even contemplate something like that. But the only way that that happened, and that required no money, is skill, right? And so like that's an example of like it didn't require money to make that money. That's skill that's required to do that. And so first is the time, right? People are not doing stuff with the time that they have, or they're doing low leverage activities with the time they have. And then they're not trying to increase their output per unit time, which means investing in their skill set. So like one of the easiest ways to gain leverage on your time, and when I say leverage, just for everybody, like leverage is the difference between inputs and outputs in a system. So, you know, our community said, if you give me a lever long enough, I can move the world. And so to the same degree, if you have enough skills, you can do anything, right? And so skills give you leverage on your time. So you get more out of each unit of time. So if I'm a master cold caller, I will get more sales and calls booked for the same unit of time than somebody who sucks at it. Same time, more output, right?
But because they developed a skill at a masterful level.
100%.
Yeah.
And so when people are allocating their time, they're not by percentage, they're kind of like consuming their time rather than investing their time. So they're either doing nothing or they're consuming the time rather than putting time into getting higher returns on their time, which is education, right? And so education you can have from like the conceptual learnings, watching stuff like this, or the actual doing, right? And so, you know, you learn
taking
more.
action,
100%.
failing, messing up, you know, feeling like an embarrassment in the actions,
The first 1,000 cold calls you make, the first 1,000 cold emails you do, the first 1,000 doors you knock on, the first 1,000, you know what, like you'll learn more from that than you'll learn from every single book you read up to that point on the concept. Like you'll learn, right? And so people don't allocate nearly enough time to that in the beginning. And so I think one of the things that the formal education system did really well, that people poo-poo on it, is the idea of going into debt to gain education is something that fundamentally makes sense.
Yes, but it's got to be the right education that can make you money.
You got to get a return on it.
Yes.
That's the issue, right? You have to get a return on it, because like the idea of borrowing from a future self that can make more money to pay for the thing that you're getting the skill for makes total sense. I think Elon was saying something about how Neuralink in the future, it's going to be such a competitive advantage that they could price it at whatever they want, because once you have it, you'll be so much more able than anyone who doesn't have it that you could so easily pay off the price of the thing. That's how it should work conceptually.
Crutches are dangerous. Superstition is dangerous. What I mean by that is that we have these things that we do, these routines that we set,
And the thing is if we become dependent on the routine, we actually become weaker as a result of it. And so that is why I am always so sensitive to religious, and I'm using quotes here, I'm using it in the literal word of religious adherence to routines, religious adherence to, how I have to wait. Like whenever you use terms like I have to, I must, we should, I need to, these are all things that you're making statements about how the world must be when you have no control over it. And so if I wanted to conquer somebody who is a competitor of mine, I would hope, I would pray that they have crutches and superstitions that I can exploit. For example, if you have to drink a bottle of alcohol every night to go to bed, that is a crutch. If you have to smoke a blunt every night to fall asleep, that is a crutch. If you have to take edibles every night to fall asleep, that is a crutch. If you have to take pills every night to go to sleep, that is a crutch. And I told you at the very beginning of this video, I know this is gonna piss a lot of people off. But believe it or not, there were humans hundreds of years ago that had none of these things and they slept just fine. Hundreds of years ago, there were humans who did not have coffee in the morning. There were humans who did not have pharmaceutical drugs. There were humans who did not have orange glasses. There are humans who did not have these weird rituals that we try and convince ourselves we must do, we have to do, we need to do, we cannot live without. And all they end up doing is weakening us. Because the thing is you have a level of maintenance, right? Of how you look and feel, whatever. And so what happens is, it's like when you start drinking coffee in the beginning, you feel better. And then over time, you need to drink coffee just to feel normal. And so then the benefit that coffee confers is gone. And so if you really want to get benefits from things, then you need to cycle the things that you do, which means inherently you're not going to have a routine because the things that you're doing are constantly changing, which give you the temporary flux or benefit that it will confer to you as a result of it being novel, if you're going to do it. But most people don't do it that way. Instead, they become dependent on these superstitions about how they must go to bed every night, how they must fall asleep and what they must take and how they have to have their mornings, or what. Or they create a punishment for themselves, or I can't be productive, or I can't think straight, or I'm really, really agitated all day, right? That's so weak. It's so weak. It makes you so non-resilient that I would hope to compete against you. You know what I mean? I would hope that. Because I would just hope that something interrupts your magical routine and then fucks you for the day, right? I've always had the belief that I'd like to be able to sleep on a cot somewhere and be just as effective in a cot with, in a corner, in a closet, as somebody who has to have every single aspect of their life completely dialed in. I see it as the difference between the Rocky cutscene of him versus Drago in Rocky 4. Drago's got all these fancy science things that he has to do and all these supplements that he's taking, all this stuff, and Rocky's just doing his thing outdoors, getting it done. The one trait I see over and over again that is clear to the people who are winners, right? The top 1%. I'm not talking top 10%, but the top 1% is the speed with which they execute after making a decision. One of the definitions that we talk about in the community is that definition of power, as I understand it, is the gap between thoughts becoming reality. So I've been reading some really interesting books lately, and I referred them out to a handful of entrepreneur friends that I have that are all doing 5 to 15 million, kind of in that range. And what was amazing to me is that every single one of them read the book immediately, sent me back their notes and what they were going to do with it. And basically were asking feedback on the angle that they were going to take with it. What's fascinating to me is that if you look at lower level entrepreneurs, and I'm not saying that in a negative way, I'm just saying in terms of just objective revenue. The delay between being able to gain information and act is so much longer, and that's why where they want to be. It's not like he has more hours in the day, right? It's not like his business is different. It's just that his level of efficacy in execution was so high because he didn't allow himself to get distracted by things. And the moment he has something he needs to execute, it creates this itch inside of him that he can't move forward without executing this so that the relief comes. And if you can start to foster that type of behavior in yourself and those attitudes about execution, you will grow faster and you will become more powerful as an entrepreneur, right? If you think about your competition, who would you fear, right? The competitor who sees what you're doing can immediately execute, implement, and improve on it at a faster loop than you can even understand what's going on, right? And that's where speed of first to market and things like that don't matter as much, because if a competitor can execute and out-OODA loop, right, can speed that loop up faster, they can iterate and improve on it faster than you can, and then you have no chance to catch up. And if you can get real with yourself about how many actual hours it will take to do something, and then you look at your week and you think, okay, what am I doing today that is more important than this? And where can I put these 2 hours? And start with the moment that you make the decision. And then all of a sudden you'll be getting things done that day, that afternoon, rather than end of week, end of month. We purposely delay these things because we just procrastinate for no reason when the problem will not go away.
If somebody is starting from scratch, what are the traits, skill sets that they should be cultivating in order to up the odds of their success?
They should focus on one thing in general, rather than lots of different things that you're not sure about. Because if you're starting out, everything looks like an opportunity. So the correct answer is all of them are opportunities, but all of them won't work unless you pick one, right? So you have to say no to all the other mistresses. So boom, you pick one. And then from there, I always say 6 figures is sell something to someone. That's it. And if you want more detail, sell something to someone. So it's one avatar, one product, one channel. So you don't have to figure out, how do I create 20 pieces of content across? It's like, just pick one channel, one media source, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, whatever, Twitter. Consistently start going on that, whether that's cold outbound, whether that's content, whether it's running paid ads, whether it's affiliates, word of mouth, whatever it is, and start reaching out to people there to start selling your stuff. And so if you can just do that consistently, and I use something, all right.
What's the skill set that's gonna make somebody good? And this is 6 figures still.
Yeah.
So what's the skill set in that? Is it getting good at the outbound? Is it getting good at saying no to the other stuff? Like, how do we translate that into a skill set?
You have to learn how to advertise, which I define as the process of making known. So how do you let other people know about the stuff you sell? So you have to advertise. There's 6 ways to do it. I covered 5 just now. So there's 6 ways you can do it. And then once people engage with whatever advertisement you have to sell them. So advertising is the first skill, selling them is the second skill. And then product would be the third skill, which is the thing that you're ultimately advertising and selling.
Okay, so that gets us 6 figures. What gets us 7?
Doing the same thing consistently. So usually once people do it in the beginning, they're sporadic, they're not consistent with it. Just the act of doing the same thing every day usually gets people to 100,000 a month, which sounds crazy to probably people listening, but most people who think that's crazy also haven't done it consistently for an extended period of time. And so I use something that I call the Rule of 100, which is 100 primary actions, whether that's 100 minutes of content creation per day, 100 reach outs per day, $100 of ad spend per day. Like, you have to pick one of them, but 100 per day, and you do that for 100 days, and I promise you'll be making 6 figures if you do that.
So the first and best way to stay poor is to start tomorrow. So whatever it is that you want to do, whether it's losing weight, saving money, starting that business, whatever it is, to start tomorrow, all right? So that's the best thing you can do to stay poor, is just start tomorrow, okay? The next one is to read lots of books and then do nothing, all right? Because it's one of the, lots of people talk about reading books, and I see people all the time that I've seen for years in the exact same position posting oh yeah, I'm reading 52 books this year. That's my commitment. Instead of reading 52 books, maybe just read 1 book and actually do something about it. Crazy, I know. Number 3, take advice from poor people on how to be rich, all right? So think about that for a second. A lot of us surround ourselves, or at least I did when I was starting out, surround ourselves with people who are very poor, and we listen to their advice on how to be rich, and they have no idea what they are doing. And we also listen to their judgment on why our idea is stupid, even though they are poor. So what would they know? So number 3, take advice from poor people on how to be rich. Number 4, this is a big one. Pick a spouse who will make you feel guilty for working. All right, so you have your dreams, you have these things you want to pursue, but this person is saying you shouldn't do that, you need to be doing X, Y, and Z, blah, 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 and then you feel like you need to compromise your dreams with that person. The problem is that you put your power of your destiny in their hands, and you're asking for permission instead of support, right? Because at the end of the day, if you don't accomplish your dreams and you did it because of them, who do you think you're going to resent? So you owe it to yourself and you owe it to your marriage to pick people who are going to support you in your dreams, even if they don't necessarily agree, right? But more easily, not put your power in somebody else, right? Number 5, fail once, quit forever, all right? So as soon as you do actually start to decide doing something, you fail immediately and say, oh, I guess this isn't for me. I guess success isn't for me. I guess business isn't for me. I guess sales isn't for me. I guess whatever the thing is, isn't for me because you failed once. But it's because we have an incorrect view of failure. Because failure is a necessary part, and the thing is you learn from failure. And so it's either you win or you learn. But that is the 5th thing you want to do if you want to stay poor forever. What are the stories that you tell yourself about yourself, right? A lot of times I had dinner recently with a $5 million a year entrepreneur, and he was like, I had a lot of trauma when I was a kid, and that's why I am this way. He speaks like he is this way because. And I was like, I think that's a really convenient story to tell yourself about why you are anxious, or why you exhibit anxious tendencies. I was like, but what if you did that and you just didn't exhibit anxious tendencies? What then? What if you just chose not to? What if you chose to not give power to that situation or that parent when you were growing up? Why they already made you suffer. Why would you let them make you suffer more by telling yourself that they gave you this character trait? Then it's because it's uncomfortable for you to suffer through the change of changing your identity, right? But Layla and I both believe this, is that your identity is fluid and you need to be able to change your identity and your character traits based on what the business requires if you want to grow, right? Like if you're not a patient person, then you need to become patient, micro speed, macro patience, right? If you want to develop a reputation, you need to become a person of integrity, which means sometimes short term you have to sacrifice, right? You have to not make the quick buck. If you want to be disciplined and have focus, then it means that you have to be able to say no. Strategy means, what do you say no to that still looks like it makes sense on paper? That's strategy. That's what it is. It's what things do we choose not to invest in, right? And the people who learn how to make the most money are the ones who know how to focus, and that's a character trait. And so what you have to do is you have to peel in your past and say, when did I exhibit these things? Because all of us have exhibited these character traits at some point in our life. And then what you do is you say, I am this way because, and then you tell yourself the stories of the things you did in the past that exhibited those traits. And by doing that, you'll start reminding yourself. So if I want to say, like, because I'll tell you, I used to have more angry tendencies. I used to tend and trend towards being angry as a response to things that I didn't like, right? But one of the things that I liked, like that I try and tell myself, is that I am wise, right? And this is a character trait that's probably been the #1 character trait that I've tried to develop over the however many years, just because I believe discernment is the single greatest character trait you can have. Because if you make the right decisions, the whole world is your oyster, right? If you can make the right call, the whole world is your oyster. And so for me, wisdom is the #1 character trait that I wish to develop. And so when I think to myself, I am wise because I use the same formula that most people, and most of us, myself included, use to destroy ourselves with these insecurities, with these negative character traits that we believe we have. And instead of saying an affirmation, you tell yourself the story of why what you're saying is true. You learn to argue against your own thoughts. And that's how you start developing this muscle, these traits that start to become a whisper and then a shout. And then they emanate from you, and you project them when you walk in the room subconsciously. But it's a practice that goes from active to passive in your mind, right? If you are a patient person, if you are a kind person, if you are an integrous person, right? If you are a hardworking person, right? We all have these stories that we tell about ourselves. And so if you have a limitation right now on your character trait or traits, you don't feel like you are patient enough, you feel like you are too easily distracted, you feel like you don't focus enough, then you need to start telling yourself the story, I am this way because, not I am wealthy. Stupid, in my opinion. I think our brains are too smart for that stuff. You have to give it the reasons, you have to make the argument. And I think instead of affirmations, if you make affirmations into arguments that you make with yourself every day, then those become things that will change who you are. And if you change who you are and how you make decisions, you'll change your entire life, and you'll be able to watch your business grow as a result of who you have become. And so this is one of the things that was most powerful for me in my entrepreneurial journey. I had tons of insecurities, right? I had tons of anxieties. I had lots of anger. I had lots of perceived trauma. And I'll say it that way because I don't even want to make it into trauma. That's just what I perceived as trauma, because I was a child in the world with the emotional regulation of a child. And so things of course affect you more when you're a kid. Everyone's traumatized, perceives trauma as a child. Like if I go to a stage and I say, hey, who here had a traumatic childhood in some instance or had a traumatic event occur? Everyone's going to raise their hand. So stop thinking that because you have trauma, and I don't say this, I'll say it this way better. For me, I chose to stop giving trauma power. And I think if you can do that, and you can tell yourself a different story about why you are who you are, and make arguments instead of affirmations, you'll be able to have stronger, faster change in the direction that you desire, and you'll have more control over your emotional state. And then in so doing, you'll be able to level up the business that you have. Because most of the times when I see business owners, the reason they're not successful is not because they don't have the beliefs or because they don't have the skills. It's just because of who they are. I had a call the other day and somebody hopped on and they were like, and honestly, the guy was an asshole. He was like, man, employees suck and I can never keep any good talent and blah, 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 blah. And I just paused and I was like, well, that's not surprising. And he was like, what? I was like, have you met you? Like, I don't know what else to say. You know what I mean? Have you met you? Like, I don't need to change this guy's marketing, right? I don't need to change this guy's beliefs about his own business. He just has to change who he is, right? And the only way for that guy to do that is for him to get over the reasons that he tells himself it's okay to be who he is. And I think a lot of us do that. We give ourselves the excuse for being impatient. We give ourselves the excuse for cheating. Right? We give ourselves the excuse for being unfaithful. We give the excuse for being unloyal. Well, my dad was, or my mom was, or my brother was, or whatever, right? Or when I was growing up, or when for my town, XYZ. I'm this way because is one of the most powerful words in the English language. It's great for persuasion. Make sure you use it to persuade yourself in the right direction.
There's 3 traits that people then they looked at because they were trying to find habits of highly successful people. And when they actually pulled apart, there's people who are really rich who wake up really late and work really late. And there's people really rich who wake up really, really early. And there's people who are really rich who eat really healthy. And there's people really rich who drink Coca-Cola and eat French fries every day. And so there's all these things that we want to make as truths, but there's easy examples that counter those things. So it's like, what are the few things that are true, or at least that seem to be present in all of the situations? And it seems as though there were surprisingly few. And so the 3 common traits that they had found were, 1, that people have a superiority complex. They believe they're better than others, and they believe that they deserve more than everyone else does, and that they can accomplish big goals, right? So they have a bigger vision because they believe they deserve it, or whatever it is, that they were able to identify that. The second thing that they were able to identify is that they had crippling insecurity, and which is a paradox of paradoxes. They feel they'll never be enough, and they'll always be measured against the things that they've achieved. And so you've got this crazy dynamic between they think they're better than everyone, they think they deserve more, they want to go after this big hill, and at the same time, they fear they'll never be good enough, and they'll never actually achieve it, and they actually suck. And then the third piece, which kind of adds the beautiful like mix of this, is impulse control. And so they're able to control their actions and focus on a single thing for an extended period of time. And so if you put those 3 things together, it's like you've got a big goal that's pulling you this way, you've got this big fear that you are running away from, and then you've got impulse control to keep you focused on the one thing that matters. Yes. And if you do that, if you are the type of person who has those traits, then you are very likely to be successful.
Some people were like, life is meaningless and there's no point in any of it, which I would agree with them. And then the other people were like, there's no point in any of it, and so I'll do what I want. And some people see that as like very, very, very self-serving, which it might be. But to the same degree, like you are released from the chains of the expectations of others. And most people, in my opinion, that I have witnessed who are unhappy is because they are weighted down by the chains of their parents, of their friends, of their siblings, of the whatever things, the people that they believe are casting judgment on them. And they care so much about that person's disapproval that they don't want to do the things that they want to do. And so I think it's easier to get someone to realize that none of it matters and then build from there than to try and flip the negatives. It's just to exit the equation altogether. Just say none of this matters. Therefore, I will start my YouTube channel and not care if my dad says that YouTube isn't real. Like, it's not about being worth it. Like, this is one where they're like, I deserve success. I'm like, no, you don't. No one deserves anything. But you can do the stuff that gets success independent of your deservingness. You can be a terrible person and become successful. So that person doesn't deserve it, but they did the things that create success. If we define success as some material, whatever. And so I think, like, if you can exit the equation of like labeling yourself and then just doing because what else will you do while you are alive? It creates some levels of freedom that allow for clarity of thought and also for the ability to take risks that most people can't take.